Welcome to The Sober Effect, a show that looks at the positives of sobriety, the dangers of alcohol, and the many people who are affected by it. I'm Kate.
And I'm Steph. The ripple effect of alcohol is far-reaching, and those are the stories you'll hear on The Sober Effect.
The Sober Effect, the Sober Effect, the Sober Effect,
All right, episode 4, we have Ricky, who used to be a Marine and is now sober. His story is one that I want to bring with a warning. I would definitely, and I think you would agree, Kate, we need to kind of trigger warning this episode because there are stories of suicide involved. And so anyone that maybe would have an issue listening to that or feel triggered needs to know ahead of time.
It's a very powerful episode, this, and we deal with a couple of very, very sensitive, traumatic, and incredibly sad stories. And Ricky is an absolute hero for talking about it so openly with us. But I mean, this conversation could have gone on for hours, couldn't it, Steph? Because
it really could.
There was just so much to talk about. As with all of our guests, they've got such incredible stories, and we're so lucky to get the chance to actually talk to them. I mean, you know, Ricky, we go through so many different topics in this episode. And I think if we talk about the beginning of his life, both of us found a lot of similarities in it because he grew up in a very open door house where he said, you know, it was like a campsite some of the times. And when he woke up in the morning, there were just people always there. It was the party house. I know you grew up in that kind of house. I definitely grew up in that kind of house as well. People wanted to be there. It was relaxed. It was fun. And of course, there was alcohol.
Yeah. And starting so young, it does something to you. It does something with your coping skills. You just learn to lean so heavily on this substance, and you never learn how to develop the skills emotionally to, you know, get through hard times. And Ricky faced some really hard times at that young age. I mean, I was young and drinking, and I had things come up, but nothing as heavy as what Ricky talks to us about.
I think when you start drinking from a young age, you know, we were both around 14 when we started. Mm-hmm. You can't handle alcohol. I mean, it's hard enough as an adult, as we've seen, but, you know, when you're 14, 15, 16, not only are you not developed, but you also don't have a lot of money. You're not going out there and buying, you know, not that any alcohol is good, but, you know, you're buying the cheapest stuff you can find, which is incredibly damaging. It's hard hitting, and it's cheap. You know, people buy it to get drunk quickly. And because you're young and you don't have a lot of money, that's what you choose.
Yeah. And it's kind of whatever you could get your hands on too. Like, I remember we would take alcohol from my parents' bar, mix it with soda or whatever we could find, and then we're filling the bottle back up with water. I mean, like, that's what you do. But like, think about that though. Think about that addictive behavior alone, where you're just, because financially, and some of us, it was really hard to buy alcohol because you have to get a fake ID or you have to find someone who's old enough. And so, but to go at any length to get the alcohol, I mean, that's like early red flag signs of addiction right there.
And of course, you've got to be 21 in America. It's younger here, you know, so we had a good few years on you, you know, and I looked 18 by the time I was 14, 15. I could pull that off. So I was always the one that went into the shops to buy alcohol for my friends. And, you know, I was buying for underage people. That's awful in itself, but I was one of them. But I do think, you know, we've sort of touched on this before. When you start drinking young and you haven't developed coping skills in life, forget alcohol. You're then dealing with all of the come down and the hangovers and all of that stuff, being drunk, you know, altering your mind, going around and being really drunk. And you're trying to deal with that when you're actually still a child in a lot of ways. And that is dangerous. It also prevents you. It stunts your brain from growing because you're you're getting over it, you're doing it again, you're recovering. Where's the time to actually organically grow as a person?
Mine was more of like the binge variety, which is actually how I drank as an adult. Like it just continued. So I was always more of, looking forward to the weekend, blowing off steam, drinking until I couldn't drink anymore. And that became a huge pattern because that's kind of how I lived my life all the way through early adulthood and on, because it's like, let's push through the work week or whatever, and then we're going to just completely black out for the weekend. And we think that that's relieving stress. We think that that's, helping, but you're not getting any rest at all. And the problems aren't going away. They're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger in the background. And yeah, I mean, it just does nothing to help you, but that's the narrative, right? That's the narrative. Have a drink.
Yeah.
You'll feel better.
Not to mention all the problems you're creating.
Right.
Because you're going out drunk, and the things you're saying, the things that are happening, the situations, you're making more problems, aren't you? Not forget the brain chemistry and the hangovers and the depression and anxiety. You're actually going out and doing things you've then got to try and work through and work out with people you've offended or upset, or arguments you've had, or injuries that you've had. It's a tumbleweed going very quickly. You can see where it's going, but you're right. You'd still look forward to it. You'd still look forward to getting so drunk you couldn't remember anything and then recovering. I mean, that is just my idea of hell. Ricky went to AA when he was 18 years old. Now in America, he was still a few years off the legal age of having a drink. And he walked into that room and said, I'm an alcoholic. I mean, that's the reality of it. And he will not be alone.
Let's meet Ricky.
My dad was a heavy alcoholic. And I got two brothers, but we always had our cousins live with us. And so they were like my brothers also. So I basically had four brothers, and they're all older. I'm the youngest. My dad owned a lawn care company. So we had a barn out back that he kept all the equipment in and everything. And there was a board on the door that only I was small enough to crawl under. And in the refrigerator in the barn is where my dad kept all his beers. They would tell me, hey, go in there and grab us a water and grab yourself one while you're at it. And, you're just a naive kid. So I'd go in there and I'd grab some and go out. And then it just turned into a habit. Maybe my brothers weren't there. I had some friends over. And I'm like, hey, do you guys want a water? And I pull the board away and they're like, this is beers. And I'm like, well, my dad drinks them. So, he lets my brothers drink them and stuff. So we're good. And then it just kind of escalates, You get to high school and you're starting to party. And everybody's like, hey, we had the party place. It was a place for everybody else to get away from their parents. You would literally wake up some mornings and my parents were like, it was a campground. Every day it turned into a hangout for my friends. One of my best friends had this bright idea of joining the Marine Corps. And it's like, didn't even know what the Marine Corps involved. I didn't know whatever. I was like, fuck it, I'm in. Let's go, Whose car are we taking, right? So we go to take this test. You got to take an ASVAB test to get the Marine Corps. You got to do pull-ups and push-ups, and then you got to have a drug test. Well, the three buddies I went with, they couldn't pass the drug test. It was kind of a sign for me to be like, you know what, maybe you just need to get the hell out of here. So I did. I was like, I'm out of here, guys. And
how old were you at this point?
18.
I was just thinking of the similarities to me, actually, because I grew up in a house that had like an open door policy. It was the cool house to hang out in London. My parents were relaxed. Everyone wanted to be at our house. There was always alcohol. And, by the time I hit 18, I had partied more than most people were planning on doing when they went to university. And I was exhausted. I'd had enough of partying and drinking by the time I finished school. That says everything, doesn't it?
We were too young to take on that addictive substance. We were just way too young, but we wanted to be older. And like you said, Kate, by the time I was done with high school, I had partied so hard. I didn't go to college, but I just remember people going to college and talking about how hard they partied in college. And I'm like, well, that was me in high school.
Yeah,
like
exactly the same. I didn't go to university. I was like, why? So when you join the Marines, what's drinking like in the Marines? I actually used to go out with a guy who went to West Point, and I remember visiting him and being shocked at the amount they drank, because I was imagining them all to take their health so seriously, you know, and all this stuff. And it was crazy, the level of drink that was consumed there. Is it yeah, what was it like in the Marines when it comes to drinking?
Well, like you said, it's a whole nother level. And so you go through boot camp, then you go through your basic training. So you got 6 months where there's nothing but 100% health going in your body. And you go to your job, they call it your MOS. I was infantry, but then when you get to the fleet, you got 2 roommates, but every room has its refrigerator, and you got a PX that's on base right down the street. And of course, you know, we filled it with beer, obviously. So yeah, the drinking escalated. And when you couldn't afford beer, because I mean, we were broke, we'd get Boone's Farm, we'd get Mad Dog, we'd throw our money together, and just, it would be the shittiest alcohol that you could ever even think of.
Sorry, I don't know what any of that means. I don't know if that is like you speaking a different language to me. What is boondog? What did
Boone's
you
Farm. Boone's Farm's like the cheapest wine you can get. It is the cheapest
Okay.
of the cheapest. Like when I was
Like
about
Blue Nun.
it was like $1.99 back in my
Okay.
day.
And Mad Dog was like a liquor, and it was
Malt liquor.
absolutely, it was so disgusting. It was horrible. Oh, but I mean, so we would go to the field. We would be in the field practicing missions and stuff for a week or 2 at a time. No drinking, no nothing. So when we got out of the field, it was time to party. We had 3 or 4 days where it was nothing but partying. We would just drink, and then say we had to get up at 3 or 4 a.m. and go running the next, you know, on Monday morning. And I mean, I don't even know how many times we'd go running and people were puking. It just smelled like 100% alcohol off everybody. We practiced a lot of shooting also, and a lot of our shooting practice was live fire. So we'd go to these big ranges, but the night before we'd be up partying and stuff. And so we'd go to the armory and draw our weapons, and we'd get in formation and go out to the live fire range. There was a time where we went out and there was groups of 4 and we were on line. And so the middle group would advance and then the ends would shoot fire. Well, the group in front of me went, and the middle group went to go again, and one of the guys didn't get up. And everybody, because a lot of people just got gun shy, where they would just freeze because of the noise and stuff like that. Well, he didn't freeze. What happened was one of the rounds went through the heel of his boot, and when the bullet, when it hits you, it tumbles when it goes on the inside, and it went through his boot, up his leg, and it ended up coming out his chest. And he did die. He died right there. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, so they obviously they shut the range down and everything. And
Do you think that was to do with drinking and not being on the ball, not being focused?
yes, 100%. Brain fog, 100%.
Yeah.
You guys, everything we did, all our drills, was basically you're hungover. Some of them are maybe still drunk, or they're like a withdrawal or whatever. You know what I mean?
People don't realize how long it takes for alcohol to get out of your system either, because I've remembered, you know, people saying, oh, don't worry, I'll drive. And it's like, you were up drinking at 3 o'clock. It's only 8 a.m. There's no way you're driving. You are not on the ball. You have not got your wits about you. You can't hold something straight, you might be shaking. I mean, it's just another thing to do with alcohol that I didn't understand, how dangerous it was to operate machinery, to go and, you know, all of these things, to drive my kids to school when I'd had 2 bottles of wine the night before. And there's me going, oh, I never drink drive. Well, guess what? That's exactly what I was doing. I just didn't realize it.
Yeah, it takes 9 hours for a bottle of wine to be out of your system. I've looked it up because, once again, I was driving to work still over the legal limit, because I easily would drink a bottle of wine and other things, you know?
Right.
And so that's just driving a car. And then what Ricky's talking about, putting a gun in your hand and you don't have a clear head.
These things can happen because alcohol is so accepted and people just assume that you're okay the next day. There are no tests, there are no checks, there are no things that you can do to yourself to make sure you're okay. You just assume everyone's here, they're awake, let's go. No one's drinking at the moment. And
You're exactly right. That's exactly how it went. A couple weeks later, we got put on, it's called Air Alert, where you're not allowed to leave the base. You could leave the base like a 10-mile radius, but you had to sign out. You could only be gone for like 20 minutes to a half hour at a time. You had to give a phone number where you were going, because Air Alert is basically, when we got called to get deployed, you had like 45 minutes to an hour to have everything ready to go. So no alcohol was allowed. You had people that would follow it. You had people that would break it. You had people like myself and others that we drank cough syrup or mouthwash. Anything besides beer that had alcohol in it, we would basically drink. And we had a Marine. He was heavy drinking, heavy anxiety. He's the one that everybody's knows is the one that I was talking about. And you could tell that it was weighing heavy on him. And so after Air Alert got lifted and everything, we got told that we were going to be going overseas, and that was for 9 to 10 months. So he went home, and a week after he went home, he committed suicide in his bathroom, and his wife and kids were there, and nobody ever really got the truth out of him because depression is that silent killer. We all think it was because of the anxiety and everything built up from that live fire range that we were at. And so I got picked as one of the other. There was 4 of us that got picked to go and basically clean the bathroom. So we went and we did what we were told to do, and then just seeing everything and doing all of that, it was where I said, what the fuck am I doing? What am I doing to myself? And that is when I decided that I quit smoking, I quit drinking, I quit dipping, just like that, for a solid year. So,
Ricky, I have to ask you, during this time when you guys are all on this lockdown, what were they doing to help you guys? I mean, you guys witnessed someone die, and then you're all on this lockdown, and then you have another guy commit suicide, and they ask you to clean it up. Is there any kind of mental health support?
There was nothing. And this was in 1997 when this happened. Nobody checked on us. Nobody consulted us. Nobody asked if we were okay. There was absolutely nothing. It was just another day.
I don't want to say makes sense, but it makes sense why the drinking is at the level that it is, right? Mm-hmm. I can't imagine. And then for you to just decide, well, I'm not going down that road. I mean, that's just amazing to me as someone who always used alcohol to get through really hard things.
How did that go down with everyone else when you stopped? Did other people sort of say that's a good idea? Or did they say, oh, come on? And was there peer pressure to carry on?
Yeah, there was a lot of peer pressure. There was a lot of, oh, you're doing it for your girlfriend. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. You got to remember, we didn't have computers. We didn't have Zooms. We didn't have that. I had to open the yellow pages up and find AA meetings because I just didn't know anywhere else to go. I was 19.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'll never forget the look on their faces. And it got to me and I was like, I'm Ricky and I'm an underage alcoholic. So that was the year that I quit everything completely. The healthiest I ever been. My mom was so proud of me because everybody in my family drinks. So when we got back from overseas, I was drinking again. I just to see the look on my mom's face, I'll never forget it. It just it hits home, when your mom's so proud of you. And then she wasn't really mad at me. She was more disappointed.
That's worse.
It is worse.
There's nothing worse than someone saying they're disappointed. In my opinion, when I say that to my children, I can see the look on their face, like, please, anything but that, because it's the opposite of when they say they're proud of you, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. So now I'm getting out of the Marine Corps, still drinking, heavy drinking.
What made you start drinking again after a year?
So on ship, I dipped Copenhagen, but we didn't have it on ship. So we had to get it to us in the mail.
Is that tobacco?
Yes. Yeah, that goes in your lip. Yep. So what they would do is, and I did not know this, they would open them for us because it would dry out. It'd get real dry. And to keep it moist, they were putting like whiskey inside it to keep it moist. So that right there was one of the kickers. Just the thinking that maybe I could just have one or two at this port, or maybe just one at this port, which turned into, we were doing a lot with the Spanish Army. They would actually serve wine or beer with their meals. And it just kind of, I gave in. So now I'm out of the Marine Corps, starting my life. I get back to Michigan. I moved back home. The drinking continued, and then I got a DUI. The drinking continued. It was out of control. There was no stopping. It was a runaway train. My other buddies, his name's Kevin. He got a DUI, so I would drive him around. He was still drinking. He got his license back. He got another DUI. I was like, dude, I can't drive you around anymore. He gets his license back, and wouldn't be damned if he gets a third. We were packing for an ice fishing trip to Wisconsin, and my wife called me, and she said, Kevin just committed suicide. She's like, you need to come home. I got in my truck, and I told my brother and stuff. I mean, Kevin was one of like my family's best friends. I've known him since third grade. I drove to Kevin's because he lived right down the street from me, and I knew where the spare key was. I walked into the garage, and it was like an instant flashback of when I was in the Marines cleaning the bathroom. It just, I couldn't handle it. It kind of really fucked me up good. But that really ramped up drinking to the point where I would wake up. I was starting to have nightmares, but the nightmares would consist of seeing the guy in the Marine Corps, to seeing Kevin, and having conversations with him, and the conversations would be with them in the shape afterwards, to say the least. My anxiety level was through the roof, my nerves, stress, everything. And I had 3 daughters at the time. I couldn't, the only way I could cope was with alcohol. So it seemed,
Right.
with that happening, it just continued. It just kept continuing on. Once the pandemic hit, my dad has a stroke. He's in the hospital. We couldn't see him. All we could do is talk to him through a window. He was dying, and there was no way to connect with him. And yeah, my dad was an alcoholic, but I love my dad. I love him. Once my dad passed, this was just over a year ago. That's when I seriously started. I had to stop. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it anymore. There was one night that my wife was out in the garage, and I was talking to my kids on the couch, and I was drunk, and I could just see the look in their face. You know how your kids look at you, and you can just tell that they're disappointed. It made me think of my mom, and I went in my bedroom and I just started crying. I got on Instagram, and I typed in sober. The Soba sisters popped up. And so I just hit message, and I sent a message. I had no idea who I was messaging. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And within minutes, I got a message back saying, "You don't have to do this by yourself. There is help." And she said, you should check out the Sober Buddy. So I let it sit in my memory bank for a couple days, and that's when I started looking into it. It's like, I want to say here I am, because if I would have never got a reply on that message, I'd probably still be the same. I'd probably still be the same. That nothing would have changed, and now here I am.
It's incredible.
I'm sort of speechless.
Me too.
There's so much information there, and it's such a traumatic series of events. It feels like watching a film or reading a book where there's a pressure cooker and all these things are happening, and you're thinking, how much more can one person take? That's so much stuff. And I can sort of almost still imagine that boy crawling under that door to get the water, and thinking it's the same child. He's never really had the chance to grow up and learn coping skills and to experience life in a safe and happy, danger-free zone where he's allowed to progress his brain and meet people and feel like he can actually focus on himself and life. It feels like you were just sent straight into the deep end, and it was just non-stop. I've never heard a story like it.
I like the way you put that. You're right. I was thrown in the deep end. I finally reached out to the VA. The VA now has so much more to offer for everybody. So I went through a 6-month sleeping disorder class for my nightmares. They diagnosed it with the PTSD, and it took me a long time. It took weeks, months to finally open up, even to my therapist, and she was like, "You were one of the toughest nuts to crack." She was like, "Usually people just kind of open up." She's like, I didn't know if you were ever going to break." And I'm like, "You don't understand how long I've held this in, from everybody."
It's so devastating and far-reaching, just so far-reaching beyond the person. It's a wonder that he had an issue with alcohol, because once again, rewind, it's all he ever learned. It's all he ever learned on how to cope with heavy things like this, because no one ever stepped in and said, you actually need help. Like, you actually need to talk to someone. Like, the alcohol is not solving these problems. It's just making things bigger and worse for you.
I mean, another thing that he brought up that kind of mirrors a lot of our previous episode and things that are coming up a lot is the whole disappointment. And it's weird, isn't it? Because when you are in the crutches of alcohol and you feel like you've disappointed someone, what do? You go out and drown your sorrows. I mean, that phrase in itself, you're not drowning your sorrows. That makes it sound like you're kind of pushing your sorrows under the water and letting them float off down the stream. you're adding to them. You've got something else to feel guilty about. You're not dealing with the disappointment. You're actually making yourself disappointed in yourself. And it's just growing and growing and growing, this load on your shoulder. You're never lightening it. And, you know, it's, I know in the end, it was his daughters who he said the way they looked at him that kind of pushed him to reach out on Instagram to the sober community and ask for help.
The disappointment he saw in his daughters was the same one that he saw from his mom. And I feel like that's where he made this connection of, it's got to be different. Like, I can't go back to drinking because I don't want to do that again. Like, I don't want to have to disappoint anyone ever again. And that's part of like that shift in your mind where you finally understand and admit to yourself that it is a problem and that it isn't helping. But you have to get to that point to finally get the help, reach out, because it's really hard to reach out for help. And I'm a woman. I mean, I know for men, it's even harder. I mean, and then a man that was in the military, and it's all about being a man and being strong and being mentally tough. And that's great. And I think he is in a lot of areas of his life. But to make these men feel like part of that is also not being able to talk about things that bother you, that's where there's a huge problem. And that's where all of these things start happening with the suicides and the PTSD and just not knowing how to ask for help. And I think it's great that Ricky is setting an example, right? He's sharing his story, and he said that he wants to find ways to help others who are maybe like him, who are afraid to admit that they need help or don't know where to go to ask for help or don't want to disappoint people if they fail. That's what's so powerful about this story, is that this man is almost a year sober and he is working through so much of his trauma. And he got emotional with us and he said it's something new, but he's doing it.
I mean, he said this is the first time he's really spoken about it and told his story. And it is incredible but you could tell, can't you? Can just tell the people who have experienced something and you don't know what it is, but they've got this empathy and this wonderful kindness and openness. And, you know, he was helped by someone on social media. And he said if they didn't reply to that message, he doesn't know where he'd be. He would probably still be drinking. He sent one message to one account. And, you know, that's the power of Instagram. I joined Instagram and the same thing. The community literally welcomed me with open arms. And they said, come in, we're here, we'll help you. We might be in different corners of the world at different stages in our sobriety. But there's this, once you've gone through sobriety, once you've clawed your way out of the darkness that is alcohol addiction or dependency or gray area drinking, when you're so scared, when you don't like yourself anymore, where you just think, I don't want to be this person. When you've managed to get out of that place, which sadly most people don't, most people carry on drinking. We are the rare few that are lucky enough to have found enough support and strength to get out of that and walk away from it.
Yes.
But once you find that and you realize, oh my gosh, this is so much better than anything I can imagine, you want to help other people. You know, and that's, you can clearly tell that from talking to him. That's what we're doing here, isn't it, Steph? We want to give something back. We've had great support. We've listened to podcasts. We've read books. We've spoken to people. And we now want to do something like that for other people. And that's the beauty of it. But if there's someone listening and they are feeling completely on their own and all their friends drink, their family drinks, and they know they want to stop, but they've got nowhere to start, what do you think? Where are the places, from having a year behind us now, where are the places that you can turn to get a bit of support? What do you think?
You know, just what I know now, there's a lot of places, but what I didn't know is that there was a lot of places, right? Because you just think you need someone directly in your life to help you, right? You're looking for someone else to get sober with you. That's kind of where I was at. And I went 99 days before I even got on Instagram. But for me, it was finding books and podcasts and those things. And that's why I love that we talk about where you can find help on these podcasts, because that's kind of what directed me to the community that I'm in now on Instagram. And it's figuring out what is going to work for you community wise as well, because I'm very introverted. So I like Instagram because I don't have to like be in a group setting with people, because being in a group is triggering for drinking, because for me, that's how I socialized. Yeah. Because I don't like to socialize in big crowds. I like more one-on-one, but I always socialized in big crowds. And so I needed alcohol to get through it. So you have to know what's going to work for you. Don't push yourself to go to a big AA meeting if that's going to give you a lot of anxiety. You know, maybe find a therapist or find, someone on social media, find these groups and reach out through DM and make it more one-on-one. I mean, you just really have to align with what's going to work for you.
I agree. And I knew I needed a challenge. And I went to Soberistas, which is a website where you join a group and you can do this 100-day challenge. And I thought, that's what I need. And you get put in groups and you're all on the same kind of, you hit day 10, day 20, day 30. And that really got me through those first 100 days. And then I also found Instagram after that, because I thought, I need more now. I need something to keep me going. But I think there is more. There are charities popping up. There are different websites that offer help with all of these things. I mean, the internet has just exploded since Ricky was in the Marines. And as he said, we didn't used to have mobile phones and laptops and iPads. We didn't have anyone. And he literally went through the yellow pages to find an AA meeting and went, which is just, I just respect him even more for that. There is someone out there who will have a similar story to you and who will be able to help. And that gives me so much comfort. Yes, preventative is always better than a cure. But let's be honest, there are millions of people out there who have a problem, and a lot of them don't realize there's anywhere to go.
If that's one thing we can get across in this episode, is don't ever be afraid to reach out and ask for help and ask for support, because there's so many ways to get it these days. There's so many options out there.
And the people want to be useful and helpful. You are not a bother. The amount of messages I get that start with, I'm really sorry to bother you.
I know.
And I reply, you are not bothering me at all. Please ask away. If I can help, I can. And I'm not alone. We all feel that way. And I think once you feel like you're not doing this on your own, you're halfway there, because it gives you the strength. When your legs are weak, and that someone else goes, grab my arm, I'll go with you, you suddenly get the strength to go on, don't you? And to try new things, and you become braver and more excited. So, you're absolutely right, Steph. If you're interested or you feel like you want to do this and you don't feel like you've got the support, it is out there and you will find your people. I promise you that. That's a really nice way to end this episode, Steph. Yeah. I think.
Yeah, I just want to thank Ricky again for being so courageous.
I agree. Right. Time to go. I'll see you soon. Cheers, Steph.
Bye, Kate.
Thank you for listening. We really hope you enjoyed the show. Remember, we're just two women from opposite sides of the pond wanting to bring awareness around the negative effects of alcohol. We are not licensed therapists or doctors. If alcohol is causing any mental or physical health issues, please seek professional help.
Please be sure to give us a follow so you don't miss future episodes. If you think our podcast could help someone you know, please be sure to share it. Also, leaving a 5-star review will help the Sober Effect reach more people like you.
The music for this show was produced and recorded by Pearl and Thumbelina Jim of the wonderful Charm Jar Music. More information can be found in our show notes.